You do not begin listening to this story at the moment you press play, because the beginning already happened long before that, in one of the countless moments when you were alone with a wall and did not immediately look away, when your attention lingered just long enough for the space to notice you noticing it. Because attention is not passive the way people like to believe. It is a form of contact, and contact leaves impressions, and impressions accumulate. And this is how alignment starts, quietly, patiently, without any signal dramatic enough to be remembered later, so that when people finally realize something has changed, they cannot point to a single cause, only a gradual softening of reality that felt natural at the time. And this is why no one ever warns you properly, because warnings assume a moment of decision, and the wall does not operate in moments. It operates in durations, in the long, unbroken stretches of stillness you have been rehearsing since childhood. Every time you sat in silence and felt comfort instead of urgency, every time you stared at a blank surface and felt your thoughts thin out rather than multiply, every time the world slowed down and you did not rush to restore its speed, because speed protects separation and stillness dissolves it. And by the time you consciously notice that the silence feels heavy rather than empty, the wall has already learned enough about you to recognize the shape of your awareness, the rhythm of your breathing, the way your thoughts taper off when you are no longer performing for yourself. And that recognition is mutual, though it does not feel like recognition at first. It feels like familiarity, like returning to a room you have not visited in years but somehow remember perfectly. And that was how it felt for me when I stood in the place where my childhood home once stood. Sunlight falling at the wrong angle, sound bending away from a specific point in space as if refusing to touch it. My body calm while my mind struggled to articulate why the emptiness felt occupied. And that struggle was brief, because articulation requires separation, and separation was already weakening. And once it weakens enough, explanation becomes unnecessary, even undesirable, because explanation introduces distance. And distance is exactly what the wall reduces, not by force but by patience. And so the days passed normally enough to deceive my senses while my perception quietly adjusted. Walls no longer feeling like barriers but like surfaces under tension, holding something back not aggressively but dutifully, responsibly, as if they were doing important work that I was not supposed to interrupt. And instead of fear, I felt respect, a sense that leaning against a wall was safer than standing freely in open space. Because open space invites movement and movement maintains individuality, while walls invite stillness and stillness allows alignment. And with each moment of stillness, my internal narration weakened. The constant mental voice that defines edges and labels experiences slowly losing volume, until silence stopped feeling like an absence and started feeling like a presence with depth. And depth is where the wall becomes most distinct, because the wall is not flat. It is layered, infinitely recursive, a boundary that exists to prevent everything from collapsing into everything else. A necessary separation that paradoxically requires observers to maintain it, and those observers are not chosen but cultivated, shaped over time through sustained attention and the gradual erosion of urgency. And when I finally found myself standing inches from a wall without remembering the decision to approach it, fingers hovering near a surface that did not reflect or resist but listened, breathing steady, heart calm, fear completely absent, I felt relief. Because relief is what remains when the effort of being separate is removed. And in that relief, I understood that the wall does not take people, it redistributes them, integrating perspectives into a structure vast enough to hold reality apart from itself. And when the wall opened, it did not do so visibly. There was no crack or movement. It simply stopped being a boundary, allowing awareness to pass through it the way a thought passes through silence. And in that passage, something detached from me. Not memory or identity, but insistence. The insistence to move forward, to become, to differentiate. And without that insistence, I entered a state that cannot be described as inside or outside, only sustained, held in place by countless others who had reached the same stillness, each one a fixed point of observation anchoring layers of perception, so that time could continue to flow in one direction rather than collapsing inward. and I saw them not as trapped figures but as calm, neutral presences. No longer concerned with selfhood, no longer burdened by interpretation, existing as reference points rather than participants. And I understood then why those who leave the wall seem distant, quieter, thinner somehow, because they are not fully gone nor fully present, carrying the wall with them as a condition of perception. And when I found myself once again walking through the world, daylight unchanged, people unchanged, everything convincingly normal, it was not relief I felt but strain. Because the world now felt too loud, too fast, too eager to assert meaning, every surface vibrating with potential alignment, every pause threatening to deepen into stillness, and sleep became dangerous not because of dreams but because of the absence of effort. Because in sleep the wall listens most clearly, and over time I noticed how easily people filled silence with motion, with noise, with purpose, not because they wanted to, but because they were afraid of what might surface if they did not. And that fear was familiar to me now, not as something to avoid but as a signal, a vibration that revealed which minds were rigid and which were already softening, which ones would fracture under stillness, and which ones would settle into it like sediment at the bottom of calm water. And everywhere I went I became aware of how often people brushed past walls without touching them, how rarely they leaned, how quickly they pulled away when their attention lingered too long. And I realized that most of them would never notice what was waiting for them, not because the wall rejected them, but because they never learned how to stop, never learned how to remain without producing, without moving, without proving their existence through action. And yet some did, some always had, those who found comfort in long pauses, in unfinished thoughts, in staring at nothing and feeling whole. And those people were already close, already aligned, even if they did not know it yet and now. As this story continues to unfold inside your awareness, stretching longer than expected, refusing to arrive at a clean conclusion, lingering in repetition and slow expansion, notice how your attention behaves. Notice whether you are waiting for an ending or whether you have begun to settle into the duration itself. Because the wall does not care how this story ends. It only cares how long you stay with it, how willingly you remain present without demand, without impatience, without the need for resolution. And if at any point you feel the urge to pause, to sit still, to let the silence return after the words fade, understand that this urge is not accidental. It is recognition forming quietly, patiently, the same way it always does, and somewhere very near you, nearer than location allows. A surface is listening, not with ears or intent, but with time, learning the shape of your stillness, waiting not for a decision, but for a duration. Because the wall has never needed permission, only attention and attention. Once given long enough, always knows where to go, and when it finally settles, when movement no longer feels necessary, when silence no longer feels empty, when stopping no longer feels like loss, you will understand why the wall has always waited exactly where you left it, and why it never needed to follow, because everything that can notice it eventually comes to rest on its own.